Hello and welcome to Talking Pharmaceuticals, an interview series brought to you by Making Pharmaceuticals and Distributing Pharmaceuticals. I'm Victoria Emerton, Conference Director for the events, which next take place in April 2025. And in the lead up, I'll be joined by experts from UK Pharma to share insights, opinions and practical advice, providing a fresh perspective on key challenges and opportunities in the industry and to look ahead to their involvement in the events. I'm delighted to be joined today by Kevin Hughes, Regional Regulatory Director at Colorcon and President of the IPEC Federation. Welcome to Talking Pharmaceuticals, Kevin. It's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Now, it's great that you're going to be at the event in April next year. I think you maybe missed the last one, so really good to have you back in Coventry with us. And you're going to be talking about nanomaterials. Your title for your presentation in the conference is Nanomaterials, Current Regulatory Position and Public Opinion. And we're going to be talking about that subject today. So just to sort of set the scene, what is a nanoparticle and where do they come from?
That's a good question. It's probably one that people haven't really thought about, but a nanoparticle is a particle that's less than 100 nanometers in size. They do occur in nature and they can be found in ash clouds from volcanoes and smoke from fires, things like that. Some human activities can also produce nanoparticles. Emissions from combustion engines. I'd also include in this list sandy beaches, dust storms, construction, etc. Whenever you have any building work anywhere near or even in your house, you'll see a fine layer of dust that settles. No matter where you are, it will be there, but that's when it's settled. But until that point, it's in the air and you're probably breathing it in. There are several excipients that contain nanoparticles. Old excipients such as iron oxides, titanium dioxide, they can contain nanoparticles, and many other insoluble mineral-based excipients are likely to contain nanoparticles. They've not been deliberately made to be in that nanoscale. They just happen to contain particles of that size from their manufacturing process.
So what's the difference between a nanoparticle and nanotechnology, and why are they perceived differently by consumers and NGOs? I'm not sure the public's terribly enamoured of nano anything. There's quite a lot of distrust, I think.
Yeah, and it seems to be increasing, coming from all sorts of different areas. Basically, anyone with a keyboard can have an opinion that can influence a lot of people, which is unfortunate. So a nanoparticle or a nanomaterial is something that's simply been classified based on its size criteria, that less than 100 nanometers. Nanotechnology is the employment of nanoscale technology to deliver a beneficial effect, like a pharmaceutical active, for example. This is known as the nanomedicine, and most people on the planet will have had one of them in the past. So the Moderna COVID vaccine and the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID vaccine both contain nanomedicines. For some reason, the view of nanoparticles or nanomaterials being used in foods is seen as bad. But when you talk about nanomaterials or nanotechnology in medicines, it's seen as good. And there are many NGOs, non-government organizations that speak out against the use of nanomaterials. Their concern is that they could accumulate in the body, leading to detrimental effects. But unfortunately, the hazard part is what's leading that discussion rather than an actual look at it and a risk assessment to see if this is really the case.
And obviously there'll be legislation surrounding nanoparticles. So what is the current legislation and on nanoparticles that impacts the pharmaceutical industry? And is there any new legislation on the horizon that will impact pharma?
It's interesting that you say that, because you'd think there'd be loads of legislation out there to guide on this, but there isn't really. So in the US, if we look at that first, there is guidance from the FDA that states if an excipient contains nanoparticles and has always contained nanoparticles, because some of these excipients have been around for decades, 50, 60 years plus, if it's being used at the same level, in the same function, through the same route of administration, they see this as very low risk and not a concern. If, however, the excipient has been deliberately made to be in the nanoscale, then a full risk assessment, safety assessment review needs to be conducted. In Europe, there's no such guidance from the MHRA in the UK or the EMA in Europe, where the guidance seems to come from the angle of safe use of nanotechnology and nanomedicines. So that's where they're focusing on. They're not really looking at the excipient. So there's a bit of a vacuum of guidance on the pharma side. On the food side, it's a very different story. So there is more regulation and guidance. And unfortunately, the direction it's traveling in is for the exclusion of these materials based on size alone, rather than any proper hazard analysis and risk assessment of that hazard. So we'll take a look at that in a bit more detail in the presentation.
Fantastic. So do nanoparticles pose a risk to human? What sort of risk might they pose? And how is this assessed by regulatory and safety bodies? It seems that a bit more work needs to be done.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is a lot more scope to look at this. It is difficult to look at, and it's really around how does the body absorb nanomaterials and nanoparticles, if at all. As I said before, it's thought that nanoparticles build up in the human body, and it's concern that has led some member states in Europe to take a really strong stance against nanoparticles, with the precautionary approach being used a bit more aggressively, shall we say. So they seem to identify the hazard based on the size of that particle alone, and then advocate its elimination from the formulation. So the European Food Safety Authority, EFSA, has a nano assessment guidance for new food additives or food additives undergoing a review, where the manufacturer is required to demonstrate the presence or otherwise of nanoparticles and then prove that they were taken into account in the last safety review. Now, if that last safety review was when they were first authorized for use, this could be 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So you literally don't have the data there, or you don't have access to that data. So if you don't have that, then you are asked or requested to conduct new safety studies, which is quite hard to do and very expensive to do as well. And this is just on the food side of things as well.
And time consuming as well, I imagine, any safety studies. Yeah, absolutely. So why should this topic concern the pharmaceutical industry, do you think?
Many excipients are also food additives. So if they're being attacked from one side, it's going to cause a ripple effect into the pharmaceutical side of things. So it's the food additives that are under scrutiny, and the precautionary principle is being applied. If that is applied rigorously, then we could lose or perhaps need to label food additives as being classed as nano. And consumers of foods will see these in one way, and then they'll see the same materials in their medicines, and start to ask questions about why, if this is a nano in a food, why is it not a nano in a pharmaceutical product? If it's banned in foods, why is it still being used in a pharmaceutical product? One of the EU member states 2 or 3 years ago published a list of 37 food additives that contain or are thought to contain nanoparticles. And if further action is taken against those, and I mean on a social media level and also on a regulatory level, then this could cause some issues for the pharmaceutical industry. And one of the biggest example of that is titanium dioxide. This was the first material to be reviewed under the EFSA nano guidance, and it resulted in a ban on titanium dioxide use in foods in the EU, despite no actual evidence of risk being identified. And right now, it's a month late, but I'm waiting for the final European Commission decision on the use of titanium dioxide in medicines, where it is used in over 91,000 drug products. So that's potentially going to have a significant impact on the pharmaceutical industry, definitely. So this is a topic that is very much of interest, worth hearing about, and I would encourage you to come along to the presentation and ask any questions that you have.
Absolutely, and I would hope that by April you'll know what's going on. If you're a month late on a deadline for information reaching you by April, it will be super hot, and you'll be able to tell everybody.
Yeah, definitely. I hope, fingers crossed. I'm looking every Friday and saying, right, hopefully it'll be by Friday. So hopefully by April we'll definitely have something.
Amazing. So Kevin's presentation title again is Nanomaterials, Current Regulatory Position and Public Opinion. And it sounds like there's an awful lot more to discuss, including things that are not necessarily out in the public domain yet, but Kevin will fully be briefed, we hope, and able to share that with everybody making pharmaceuticals in Coventry in April. So IPEC Europe will be on stand 827. Kevin's going to be at the event and around and about for people to come and talk to him, before his presentation and certainly afterwards. And I'm sure you're bringing colleagues with you who will be available also for people to come along and have a chat to.
Definitely. Look for us on the IPEC Europe stand, and I think I'll also be spending some time on the Colorcon stand as well.
Brilliant. Busy couple of days for you. Okay.
Yes.
So attending the exhibition and conference is free, and registration is open at www.makingpharma.com. The conference programme is also available on the website. There's a lot to digest on there, so very sensible to go on in advance and plan your time at the event to best effect. So thank you so much for your time today, Kevin. We look forward to seeing you and your colleagues at the Coventry Building Society Arena on the 29th and 30th of April.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.